In the heat of battle, when bullets fly and chaos reigns, assumptions can kill. For 37 minutes on a scorching September morning in Afghanistan, a team of Navy SEALs believed they were protecting a frightened nurse caught in the crossfire. They had no idea that the quiet woman crouched behind the medical supplies would soon pick up a rifle and single-handedly turn the tide of a battle that seemed lost. This is the true story of how one person's hidden past and extraordinary courage transformed what should have been a devastating defeat into one of the most remarkable victories in modern military history. Sometimes the most dangerous warriors come in the most unexpected packages, and sometimes salvation arrives when you least expect it and from someone you never saw coming. What happened next will be talked about in military circles for years to come, challenging everything these hardened soldiers thought they knew about courage, combat, and the power of never judging someone by their appearance. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison checked his gear one final time. His team of 8 Navy SEALs had been deployed to the remote village of Kalash in eastern Afghanistan with what seemed like a straightforward mission: extract intelligence from a compromised safe house and secure any civilian personnel who might have valuable information about terrorist activities in the region. Morrison had been leading SEAL operations for 12 years, and this felt like dozens of other missions he had completed successfully. The intelligence briefing had been thorough. Satellite images showed a quiet village with minimal hostile activity, and local contacts confirmed that the target building housed a small medical clinic that had been providing cover for intelligence operations. The team moved through the pre-dawn darkness with practiced silence. Rodriguez covered the rear, his eyes constantly scanning for movement. Thompson and Williams flanked the main approach, while Davis and Chun positioned themselves to monitor escape routes. The newest member of their team, Petty Officer Sarah Bennett, had joined them just 3 weeks earlier, fresh from advanced training and eager to prove herself in real combat situations. As they approached the village, everything seemed normal. Smoke rose from a few chimneys where families were preparing morning meals. Children could be heard playing in distant courtyards. Dogs barked occasionally, but nothing seemed out of place. Morrison felt that familiar calm that came before an operation, when training took over and every movement became automatic. The safe house sat at the edge of the village, a 2-story stone building that looked identical to dozens of others they had seen across the country. According to their intelligence, it served as a medical clinic during the day and housed communication equipment at night that insurgents used to coordinate attacks against coalition forces. Their job was simple: get in, download the data from the computers, secure any documents, and get out before anyone noticed they had been there. Bennett took point as they approached the building, her weapon ready but held low to avoid alarming any civilians who might be present. She had studied the building plans for hours during their preparation, memorizing every room and potential hiding spot. Her job was to secure the first floor while the rest of the team moved upstairs to the communication equipment. The front door stood slightly ajar, which immediately raised Morrison's alert level. Their intelligence had indicated the building would be locked and secured overnight. He signaled for the team to halt and reassess the situation. Through hand signals, he communicated his concerns and ordered a more cautious approach. Williams moved to a window on the left side of the building and peered inside. He could see medical supplies scattered on tables and what appeared to be examination equipment typical of a small rural clinic. Everything looked normal, but the open door continued to bother Morrison. In his experience, details like that often meant the difference between a successful mission and walking into an ambush. Chun circled to the back of the building to ensure they had covered all possible escape routes. His report came back through their radio system in whispers. No movement detected, no vehicles present, no signs of recent activity around the rear entrance. The building appeared to be exactly what their intelligence had described: a small medical facility with minimal security. Morrison made the decision to proceed, but with heightened caution. He divided his team into 2 groups. 3 men would secure the perimeter while the remaining 5 entered the building to complete their primary mission. The plan was to be inside for no more than 15 minutes, just enough time to copy the computer files and search for any physical documents that might contain valuable intelligence. Bennett pushed the door open slowly, her weapon raised and ready. The interior of the building was dimly lit by early morning light filtering through small windows. Medical equipment lined the walls, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Everything appeared normal for a rural medical clinic, but years of training had taught her to remain alert for anything unusual. The first floor contained 3 rooms, a waiting area near the entrance, an examination room to the left, and what appeared to be a supply storage room toward the back. Bennett methodically cleared each room, ensuring no threats were present before signaling for the rest of her team to enter. Her movements were precise and professional, demonstrating the high level of training she had received. Morrison and 2 other team members headed for the stairs leading to the second floor, where their intelligence indicated the communication equipment would be located. The wooden steps creaked slightly under their weight, but the building remained silent except for the normal sounds of a village waking up outside. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The second floor layout matched their intelligence briefings perfectly. 2 rooms contained what appeared to be living quarters for medical staff, while a third room at the front of the building housed the electronic equipment they had come to find. Computer monitors glowed softly in the dim light, and the familiar hum of electronic equipment filled the air. Davis began the process of copying files from the computer systems while Morrison and Williams searched through papers and documents scattered around the room. Most of the paperwork appeared to be routine medical records and supply inventories, but they carefully photographed everything to be analyzed later by intelligence specialists back at their base. Meanwhile, Bennett continued her security sweep of the first floor, ensuring that no threats approached from outside and that no one was hiding in areas they might have missed during their initial clearing operation. The village remained quiet, and she began to relax slightly as the mission proceeded smoothly. Thompson monitored radio communications from outside the building, listening for any signs that their presence had been detected by hostile forces. Local police frequencies remained quiet, and there were no unusual patterns in civilian radio traffic that might indicate someone had reported their presence. As Davis worked on the computer systems, he discovered that the files contained extensive correspondence between local insurgent groups and larger terrorist organizations operating throughout the region. The intelligence was more valuable than they had expected, with detailed plans for attacks against coalition supply convoys and information about weapons caches hidden throughout the province. Rodriguez maintained his position at the rear of the building, watching for any movement that might indicate they were being observed or that hostile forces were moving to surround their position. His years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about the morning felt different than usual, though he couldn't identify exactly what was making him uneasy. Morrison checked his watch and noted they had been inside the building for 8 minutes. Their timeline was on track, and the mission was proceeding exactly as planned. The computer files would provide valuable intelligence for future operations, and they had found several documents that appeared to contain information about insurgent supply lines and funding sources. As the file copying process neared completion, Bennett noticed movement outside one of the first floor windows. A woman was approaching the building, carrying what appeared to be medical supplies. She moved slowly and appeared to be alone, suggesting she might be a nurse or doctor arriving for work at the clinic. The appearance of a civilian complicated their mission, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. Their intelligence had indicated that the clinic operated during normal business hours and that medical staff might arrive early to prepare for patients. Bennett signaled Morrison about the approaching civilian and requested instructions on how to proceed. Morrison faced a common dilemma in special operations: how to complete their mission while ensuring the safety of innocent civilians who might accidentally stumble into their operation. The woman appeared to pose no threat, but her presence meant they would need to modify their extraction plan to avoid being seen as they left the building. The woman reached the front door and paused, seemingly surprised to find it standing open. She called out softly in the local language, presumably asking if anyone was inside. Bennett couldn't understand the words, but the tone suggested concern rather than alarm. The woman appeared to be a legitimate medical worker who was surprised to find the clinic unlocked. Davis completed his work on the computer systems and signaled that he had successfully copied all the relevant files. The team was ready to begin their extraction, but the presence of the civilian woman meant they would need to wait for her to move away from the building before they could leave without being detected. Morrison made the decision to wait in place until the woman left the area. Their mission was too important to risk compromise, and a few extra minutes wouldn't significantly impact their overall timeline. He signaled for all team members to remain in position and continue monitoring for any changes in the tactical situation. The woman entered the building through the front door, moving quietly and apparently unaware that anyone else was present. She began setting up medical supplies in the examination room, suggesting she was indeed a medical worker preparing for the day's patients. Her movements were efficient and professional, indicating familiarity with the clinic's layout and procedures. Bennett watched from her concealed position as the woman organized medical equipment and reviewed what appeared to be patient charts from the previous day. Everything about her behavior suggested she was a legitimate medical professional with no connection to the insurgent activities that had brought the SEAL team to this location. However, their situation had become more complicated. They could not leave the building without being seen by the woman, and they could not reveal their presence without potentially compromising future operations. Morrison considered their options. They could wait for the woman to leave, they could attempt to exit through a back window, or they could detain the woman temporarily while they completed their extraction. The decision became academic when the sound of approaching vehicles broke the morning silence. Thompson's voice came through their radio system with urgent information. Multiple vehicles were approaching the village at high speed, and their configuration suggested military or paramilitary forces rather than civilian traffic. Morrison immediately ordered his team to prepare for potential combat. The presence of hostile forces meant their mission had been compromised, either by chance or because someone had detected their presence and called for reinforcements. Either way, their simple intelligence gathering operation was about to become significantly more complicated. Through the windows, they could see dust clouds approaching from two different directions, indicating that at least two separate groups of vehicles were converging on their location. The tactical situation had shifted dramatically from a covert operation to a potential combat engagement, and they found themselves trapped in a building with an innocent civilian who had no idea what was about to happen. Bennett moved to secure the woman in the examination room, planning to keep her safe during whatever was about to occur. As she approached, she noticed something that struck her as unusual. Despite the obvious sounds of approaching vehicles and the tense atmosphere that had suddenly filled the building, the woman showed no signs of fear or confusion. Instead, she appeared alert and focused, as if she was assessing the same tactical situation that the SEAL team was evaluating. The vehicles were now close enough that individual engines could be heard, and radio chatter in the local language suggested coordinated movement by hostile forces. Morrison realized that his team was about to face a significant engagement, and their primary concern had shifted from completing their mission to surviving contact with superior numbers of enemy forces while protecting an innocent civilian who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The first shots rang out before Morrison could finish positioning his team. The sharp crack of AK-47 rifles echoed through the village as insurgent forces opened fire on the clinic building. Windows shattered, sending glass fragments across the floors, and chunks of stone flew from the walls as bullets struck the ancient masonry. Bennett threw herself toward the examination room, where the civilian woman remained surprisingly calm. Instead of the panic and screaming Morrison expected from an innocent bystander caught in combat, the woman had moved efficiently to a position behind a heavy medical cabinet that provided protection from incoming fire. Her movements were too deliberate, too practiced for someone with no military experience. "Ma'am, you need to stay down and keep quiet," Bennett shouted over the gunfire. not knowing if the woman spoke English, but hoping her tone would communicate the urgency of the situation. The woman nodded and replied in heavily accented but clear English, "I understand." "How many are outside?" The question surprised Bennett. Most civilians in this situation would be asking how to get out or crying for their families. This woman was asking for tactical information as if she expected to use it. Before Bennett could respond, another volley of gunfire forced both women to duck lower as bullets punched through the walls above their heads. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio system as he tried to coordinate his team's response to the attack. "Rodriguez, what's your count on vehicles?" The answer came back immediately. 6 trucks, approximately 30 hostiles, armed with automatic weapons, and at least 1 RPG launcher. They've got us surrounded on 3 sides. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Morrison's 8-person team was outnumbered nearly 4-1, trapped in a building that provided limited defensive positions and responsible for protecting a civilian. Standard procedure would be to call for air support and extraction, but the nearest friendly forces were over an hour away, and hostile fire was already making their position untenable. Williams positioned himself at a second-floor window that provided a view of the main approach to the building. Through his rifle scope, he could see insurgent fighters moving between buildings as they attempted to surround the clinic completely. Their movements were coordinated and professional, suggesting this was not a random encounter, but a planned operation. "They knew we were coming," Davis said grimly as he took cover behind an overturned desk. This whole thing was a setup. Morrison had reached the same conclusion. The timing was too perfect, the response too quick and organized for this to be a coincidence. Someone had leaked information about their mission, and they had walked directly into a trap. Chin reported from his position, covering the rear of the building, that insurgent forces were also approaching from that direction, eliminating their planned escape route. The building that had seemed like adequate cover for a quick intelligence operation was now becoming their tomb. Stone walls that could stop small arms fire would not hold up against rocket-propelled grenades or heavy machine gun fire for very long. The woman in the examination room caught Bennett's attention again. While bullets continued to fly overhead, she was systematically going through medical supplies with the efficiency of someone conducting an inventory. Her behavior was so unusual that Bennett began to wonder if shock had affected the woman's mental state. "Are you injured?" Bennett asked, thinking that might explain the woman's strange calmness. The woman looked up and shook her head. "No, I am fine, but some of you will be injured soon, and I am preparing." Her English was clear despite the accent, and her reasoning was logical, but something about her demeanor continued to puzzle Bennett. Morrison attempted to establish radio contact with their command base to request immediate extraction and air support. The response was not encouraging. Weather conditions had grounded most aircraft, and the nearest ground forces were engaged in operations elsewhere in the province. His team was on their own for at least the next several hours. Thompson took a round through the shoulder as he tried to return fire from a first-floor window. The bullet passed through muscle without hitting bone, but he was bleeding heavily and needed immediate medical attention. "We've got wounded," Morrison announced over the radio, knowing that their tactical situation had just become even more desperate. Bennett looked toward the woman, who had overheard the radio transmission. "You said you were preparing for wounded soldiers," Bennett said. "Are you a doctor?" The woman nodded and moved quickly toward where Thompson had taken cover, carrying a medical kit she had assembled from supplies around the room. "I am Dr. Elena Petrov," the woman said as she knelt beside Thompson and began examining his wound. "This will hurt, but I need to stop the bleeding." Her hands moved with the practiced confidence of someone who had treated gunshot wounds before, and Thompson's bleeding slowed significantly under her care. The revelation that their civilian was actually a doctor provided some relief, but Morrison's team still faced overwhelming odds. Insurgent forces were tightening their encirclement, and the volume of incoming fire was increasing. Several more windows had been shot out, and bullet holes were appearing in interior walls as the attackers found better angles of fire. Rodriguez spotted movement that indicated the insurgents were preparing to assault the building directly rather than continuing the siege. "They're getting ready to rush us," he reported. "I count at least 15 fighters moving to assault positions." Morrison knew his team could not survive a direct assault by superior numbers in close-quarters combat. Williams engaged targets through his scope, trying to slow the insurgent advance, but for every fighter he eliminated, 2 more seemed to take his place. The enemy force was larger than their initial estimates, and they appeared to have reinforcements arriving continuously. What had started as a simple intelligence mission was turning into a fight for survival against overwhelming odds. Dr. Petrov finished treating Thompson's wound and moved to a position where she could observe the tactical situation through a partially destroyed window. Her behavior continued to puzzle Bennett, who noticed that the doctor was not simply watching the fight, but appeared to be analyzing the insurgent positions and movements with military precision. "Doctor, you need to stay away from the windows," Bennett warned. "It's not safe." Dr. Petrov nodded, but continued her observation. "I'm trying to understand their plan," she replied. "They are not attacking randomly. This is organized, and they have done this before." Her assessment matched Morrison's own conclusions. The insurgent force was employing professional military tactics, with coordinated movement and disciplined fire control. They were not the usual collection of untrained fighters that coalition forces often encountered, but experienced combatants who understood small unit tactics and urban warfare. Chin took a grazing wound across his left arm as he tried to reposition to a better defensive location. The injury was minor, but it demonstrated that the insurgents were improving their positions and finding angles that the SEAL team had not anticipated when they first took cover in the building. Dr. Petrov moved to assist Chun with his wound, displaying the same efficient medical skills she had shown with Thompson. As she worked, she continued to ask questions that seemed unusual for a civilian doctor. "How much ammunition do you have remaining? Are your communications with headquarters working?" Bennett began to suspect that Dr. Petrov had more military experience than she was revealing. Her questions were too informed, her movements under fire too confident, and her medical treatment of gunshot wounds too practiced for someone whose only military exposure was treating wounded soldiers as a civilian doctor. The insurgent assault began with a rocket-propelled grenade that struck the second floor of the building, creating a massive hole in the wall and filling the air with debris and dust. Morrison was thrown across the room by the blast, striking his head against a wall and losing consciousness for several seconds. When he regained his senses, his ears were ringing, and blood was running down his face from a scalp wound. Williams had been closer to the RPG impact and was seriously injured with burns on his arms and back from the explosion. He was conscious but unable to continue fighting effectively, reducing Morrison's team to 6 effective combatants against an enemy force that now appeared in number over 40 fighters. Dr. Petrov immediately moved to assist Williams, but as she worked, she asked Bennett a question that confirmed all her suspicions about the doctor's background. "Which of you men is the best marksman with a sniper rifle?" The question was too tactical, too informed about military operations for someone with no combat experience. "Why do you need to know that?" Bennett asked, becoming increasingly curious about their unexpected civilian companion. Dr. Petrov finished bandaging Williams' injuries before answering. "Because I think I can help you, but I need to know what resources you have available." Before Bennett could ask what kind of help a doctor could provide in a combat situation, insurgent fighters breached the building's rear entrance. Chun engaged them immediately, but he was outnumbered and forced to fall back toward the front of the building. The enemy was now inside their defensive perimeter, and close-quarters combat was imminent. Morrison, still groggy from the RPG blast, tried to coordinate his team's response to the breach, but the tactical situation was changing too rapidly for systematic defense. His men were spread throughout the building, several were wounded, and ammunition was running low after nearly 20 minutes of sustained combat. Dr. Petrov stood up and moved toward a corner of the examination room where medical equipment had been stored. To Bennett's amazement, she began moving boxes and supplies aside as if she was looking for something specific. "Doctor, you need to take cover," Bennett shouted as gunfire erupted from the rear of the building where Chun was engaging the insurgents who had breached their perimeter. "I'm taking cover," Dr. Petrov replied calmly, "but first I need to find my equipment." She moved aside a large cabinet, revealing what Bennett initially thought was more medical supplies. Then she saw the rifle case hidden behind the medical equipment, and everything suddenly became clear. Dr. Petrov was not just a doctor who had accidentally walked into their operation. She was someone with military training who had been expecting exactly this kind of situation. The rifle case was not hidden hastily during the firefight, but had been positioned there deliberately, ready for use when needed. "Who are you really?" Bennett demanded as Dr. Petrov opened the case to reveal a precision sniper rifle that had definitely not been part of the clinic's medical equipment. The weapon was well-maintained and equipped with advanced optics that cost more than most soldiers made in a year. Dr. Petrov looked up at Bennett with a slight smile that was completely out of place in their desperate situation. Dr. Elena Petrov, former captain, Russian Spetsnaz, currently providing medical services to this region, she said as she quickly assembled her rifle with movements that spoke of years of training and experience. The revelation hit Bennett like a physical blow. They had not rescued a civilian doctor caught in crossfire. They had stumbled into the territory of one of the most elite special forces operators in the world, someone whose training and experience probably exceeded that of anyone on Morrison's team. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio with increasing urgency. "We've got multiple breaches. They're inside on both floors. We need to move now, or we're not getting out of here." Morrison tried to respond, but his head injury was affecting his ability to think clearly, and he was having trouble coordinating his team's response to the rapidly deteriorating situation. Dr. Petrov finished assembling her rifle and moved to a window that provided a clear view of the insurgent positions surrounding the building. "I'm going to help you," she announced to Bennett, "but I will need your team to provide covering fire while I work." Bennett stared at the transformation that had taken place. The quiet medical worker had become a confident special forces operator with equipment and skills that might actually change the outcome of their desperate situation. "Why?" she asked. "Why help us?" Dr. Petrov checked her rifle's scope and chambered a round before answering. "Because," she said calmly as gunfire continued to echo through the building, "these men killed my medical staff 2 weeks ago. This is personal." Dr. Elena Petrov moved to the window with the fluid precision of a practiced sniper, her medical bag forgotten as she transformed into something entirely different. Bennett watched in fascination as the quiet woman who had been calmly organizing medical supplies now conducted a systematic survey of the battlefield with the cold efficiency of a professional killer. "The leader is in the blue truck, approximately 200 meters southeast," Elena said as she adjusted her rifle scope. "He has been coordinating their movements through hand signals. Remove him, and their organization will collapse for approximately 30 seconds. That will be your window to reposition." The clinical way she analyzed the tactical situation sent chills down Bennett's spine. This was not someone playing at being a soldier. This was someone for whom combat was as natural as breathing. Elena's movements were economical and purposeful, wasting no motion as she prepared for what was clearly not her first long-range engagement. Morrison, still fighting off the effects of his head injury, struggled to process this dramatic change in their situation. His team had been facing overwhelming odds and certain death just minutes earlier. Now they apparently had one of the world's most elite special forces operators on their side, someone whose reputation for precision and lethality was legendary even among American special forces. "How do we know we can trust you?" Morrison managed to ask, his voice still slurred from the concussion. Elena glanced at him briefly before returning her attention to her scope. "Because if I wanted you dead, you would already be dead," she replied matter-of-factly. "I've had clear shots at all of you for the past 15 minutes. The simple truth of her statement was undeniable. If Elena had been working with the insurgents, Morrison's team would not have survived the initial assault. Her position in the building had given her perfect opportunities to eliminate key team members, but instead, she had been treating their wounded and preparing to help them escape. Rodriguez's situation at the rear of the building was becoming desperate as more insurgents breached their perimeter. His ammunition was running dangerously low, and he was being forced to fall back toward the center of the building, where he would have no cover from multiple directions. "I need support back here," he called over the radio, strain evident in his voice. Elena's first shot was fired without warning, the sharp crack of her rifle cutting through the constant chatter of automatic weapons fire. Through the window, Bennett could see the insurgent leader Elena had identified, pitching forward as the bullet found its target across an impossible distance given the chaos and limited visibility of the battlefield. The effect was exactly as Elena had predicted. The insurgent assault faltered immediately as fighters looked around in confusion, unsure who was giving orders or what their next move should be. The coordinated attack dissolved into random gunfire as individual fighters took cover and tried to understand what had happened to their commander. "Now," Elena said calmly, already tracking her next target. "Rodriguez, move to the front room. Chun, take the stairs to the second floor. You have 20 seconds before they reorganize." Her tactical assessment was proving accurate as the insurgents struggled to adapt to the sudden loss of their leadership. Morrison found himself following orders from someone who was technically a foreign national and former enemy, but Elena's expertise was undeniable. Her analysis of the tactical situation was superior to his own, and her first shot had already changed the dynamics of the engagement in their favor. Elena's second shot eliminated an insurgent who was attempting to rally the scattered fighters around the building. The man had been moving between positions, shouting orders in the local language, trying to restore coordination to the confused assault. Elena's bullet ended his efforts permanently, ensuring the enemy forces remained disorganized. "Tell me about your extraction plan," Elena said as she continued to observe the battlefield through her scope. Morrison realized he should be coordinating with their unexpected ally rather than simply following her tactical suggestions. "Helicopter pickup from a village center, but not for several hours. Weather has everything grounded." Elena nodded, unsurprised by the complication. "Then we need to thin their numbers significantly and find a way to break contact. How much ammunition does your team have remaining?" Her questions continued to demonstrate a thorough understanding of special operations planning and execution. Bennett provided an inventory of their remaining resources while Elena took her third shot, eliminating an insurgent who had been setting up what appeared to be a heavy machine gun that would have made their position untenable. Each of Elena's shots was precisely placed and immediately effective, removing key threats before they could impact the engagement. "I count 37 remaining fighters," Elena reported as she continued her methodical elimination of priority targets. "Most are inexperienced, but 6 or 7 show professional military training. Those are the ones we need to eliminate first." Her ability to assess enemy capabilities while engaged in active combat demonstrated a level of battlefield awareness that impressed even Morrison's experienced team. Thompson, despite his shoulder wound, had managed to return to a fighting position and was providing covering fire for Rodriguez as the team repositioned according to Elena's tactical guidance. The combination of suppressive fire from the SEAL team and precision elimination of key targets by Elena was beginning to shift the momentum of the engagement. Shin reached the second floor and reported that the damage from the RPG attack had actually created new defensive positions that provided better fields of fire than their original locations. "The blast opened up sight lines we didn't have before," he reported. "I can cover the entire southern approach from up here." Elena's fourth shot eliminated the insurgent carrying the RPG launcher, ensuring that no additional rockets would threaten the building's structural integrity. "Your man on the second floor needs to shift 3 meters to his left," she instructed. "There is a sniper in the brown building across the square who has been trying to get an angle on him." Morrison relayed the warning to Chun, who immediately adjusted his position. Seconds later, a bullet struck the wall exactly where he had been positioned, confirming Elena's observation and potentially saving Chen's life. Her ability to track multiple threats simultaneously while engaging her own targets was remarkable even by Special Forces standards. "Who are you really?" Morrison asked as Elena reloaded her rifle with practiced efficiency. "I mean beyond the name and former unit. What are you doing here?" Elena continued to observe the battlefield as she answered, never taking her attention completely away from the tactical situation. "I was assigned to establish a medical clinic in this region 6 months ago," she said, taking her 5th shot and eliminating another insurgent who had been trying to coordinate the scattered fighters. "Officially, I am retired from military service and working as a humanitarian aid provider. Unofficially, I gather intelligence on terrorist activities for my government." The admission that Elena was still actively working for Russian intelligence should have complicated Morrison's decision to trust her, but their shared immediate interest in surviving the current engagement outweighed larger geopolitical considerations. Enemy fire was decreasing as Elena systematically eliminated the insurgents' most effective fighters. Williams, despite his injuries from the RPG blast, had managed to establish radio contact with their command base and was reporting their changed tactical situation. The news that a former Russian Spetsnaz operative was actively assisting American forces would certainly create interesting discussions at higher command levels, but those conversations could wait until after they survived. Elena's 6th shot took down an insurgent who had been attempting to flank their position by moving through adjacent buildings. "The remaining fighters are becoming more cautious," she observed. "They know someone is eliminating their people, but they have not yet identified my position. We have perhaps 5 more minutes before they adapt their tactics." Rodriguez reported that the pressure on the rear of the building had decreased significantly as the insurgents pulled back to reassess their situation. "Whatever you're doing up there, keep doing it," he said over the radio. "They've stopped trying to breach the back entrance." Elena's tactical assessment proved accurate as the surviving insurgents began to withdraw to more defensive positions rather than continuing their assault on the building. Her precision shooting had eliminated their leadership and most experienced fighters, leaving behind a confused and demoralized force that was no longer capable of coordinated offensive action. "Now we have a choice," Elena said as she observed the changed battlefield. "We can wait for your extraction and hope they do not bring reinforcements, or we can take the initiative and break contact while they are disorganized." Morrison was beginning to trust Elena's tactical judgment more than his own assessment of their situation. Davis reported that he had successfully completed their primary mission objective during the firefight, copying all the intelligence files they had come to retrieve. "The computer data is secure," he announced. "We have everything we came for." The revelation that they had actually accomplished their mission despite the ambush was welcome news. Elena took her 7th shot, eliminating an insurgent who had been trying to advance closer to the building. "I recommend we move now," she said as she continued to track targets through her scope. "They will call for reinforcements, and the next group that arrives will be better prepared to deal with a sniper." Morrison found himself deferring to Elena's expertise as he planned their extraction from the building. Her knowledge of the local terrain and enemy tactics was superior to anything in their mission briefings, and her demonstrated combat effectiveness had already saved his team from almost certain death. "There's a route through the buildings to the north that will take us to the village outskirts without crossing open ground," Elena explained as she prepared to abandon her sniper position. "From there, we can reach a location where helicopter extraction will be possible even in marginal weather conditions." Bennett helped Elena pack her rifle as the team prepared to move according to her plan. "Why are you helping us?" she asked again. "Your government and ours are not exactly allies." Elena finished securing her equipment before answering with a slight smile that was both sad and determined. "Because," she said, "these insurgents killed my entire medical staff 2 weeks ago when they attacked this clinic." Dr. Ahmed was 70 years old and had been treating children in this village for 30 years. Nurse Fatima had 3 children of her own and worked 16 hours every day to help others. They were good people who never hurt anyone. The personal motivation behind Elena's assistance became clear This was not about geopolitics or international relations. This was about justice for murdered friends and colleagues, about professional soldiers recognizing professional soldiers regardless of nationality, and about the sometimes surprising alliances that combat creates between people who might otherwise be enemies. Morrison made the decision to follow Elena's extraction plan. Her tactical expertise had already saved his team. Her knowledge of the local situation was clearly superior to their intelligence briefings, and her personal motivations aligned with their immediate need to survive and escape. Politics could be sorted out later by people who were not currently being shot at. "All right, people," Morrison announced over the radio. "We're moving in 2 minutes. Follow Dr. Petrov's lead and stay close. We're getting out of here." Elena moved through the building with the fluid grace of someone who had mapped every corner, every potential hiding spot, every tactical advantage during her months of working at the clinic. She led Morrison's team through a route that avoided the main areas where insurgents had concentrated their forces, using her intimate knowledge of the building's layout to keep them concealed while they prepared for their escape. "The northern wall has a window that opens onto a flat roof," Elena explained as she guided them toward their exit point. "From there, we can move across 3 buildings before we need to descend to street level. The insurgents have not positioned anyone to cover that approach because they do not know it exists." Morrison found himself impressed not only by Elena's tactical skills, but by her preparation and planning. This escape route had not been improvised during the firefight, but had been planned and prepared in advance, suggesting that Elena had been anticipating exactly this type of situation for some time. Bennett helped Williams move despite his injuries from the RPG blast, while Chun and Rodriguez provided rear security as they prepared to abandon their defensive positions in the clinic. The team moved in the disciplined silence that marked professional soldiers, but Morrison could see the strain of the prolonged engagement in their faces and movements. Elena paused at the window she had identified, listening carefully to sounds from outside before slowly opening it to check for enemy presence. "Clear," she whispered, then smoothly climbed through the opening onto the flat roof beyond. Her movements were confident and practiced, confirming that she had used this route before. The roof provided a view of the entire battlefield, and Morrison could see the tactical situation more clearly than had been possible from inside the building. Elena's sniper fire had eliminated at least 8 insurgents, including all of their apparent leaders, and the remaining fighters were scattered and disorganized around the perimeter of the clinic. "They are waiting for instructions from someone who is not coming," Elena observed as she studied the insurgent positions. "Without leadership, they will maintain their positions until someone arrives to tell them what to do. That gives us perhaps 30 minutes before reinforcements arrive with new commanders." The team moved across the first roof following Elena's guidance, staying low to avoid being silhouetted against the sky. The ancient buildings were built close together, making it possible to step from one roof to another without climbing down to street level, where they would be exposed to enemy fire. Davis reported over the radio that he was monitoring insurgent communications, and their radio traffic confirmed Elena's assessment. The fighters were asking for instructions and reporting that their commanders were not responding, but they were maintaining their positions around the clinic as they had been ordered. Elena led them across the second roof, moving with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this exact route multiple times. "I have been planning for this day since the attack on my medical staff," she admitted to Morrison as they moved. "I knew they would return to finish what they started." The third building required a more difficult transition, involving a drop of several feet to a lower roof, and then a climb up to reach the far side. Elena descended first, providing security while the rest of the team made the transition. Williams needed assistance due to his injuries, but the team managed the obstacle without being detected by the insurgents below. Thompson, despite his shoulder wound, had regained most of his combat effectiveness and was providing overwatch as they moved across the rooftops. His wound was painful, but not debilitating, and Elena's medical treatment had stopped the bleeding and stabilized his condition enough for him to continue functioning as part of the team. From their elevated position, Elena pointed out the route they would follow once they reached street level. 2 blocks north, then east through the marketplace, then north again to the ridge line, where helicopter extraction will be possible, she explained. The entire route can be covered without crossing open ground where we might be observed. Rodriguez reported that he could see movement in the distance that suggested additional vehicles approaching the village. "We've got company coming," he announced over the radio. "Looks like at least 3 more trucks, maybe 15 minutes out." The window for their escape was closing as enemy reinforcements moved to reinforce the siege. Elena nodded, having expected this development. "The local commander will have called for assistance when his assault failed," she said. "We need to be away from this area before they arrive, or we will face a much larger force that will be specifically prepared to deal with a sniper." The team reached the edge of the roof where they would need to descend to street level to continue their escape. Elena checked the alley below carefully before indicating it was safe to proceed. "From here, we move quickly but quietly. Stay close to the buildings and avoid the center of the street where we might be visible from the clinic area." Morrison's team descended into the narrow alley, with Elena taking point because of her familiarity with the local terrain. The village streets were a maze of narrow passages between ancient stone buildings, providing excellent concealment, but also creating the possibility of unexpected encounters with enemy patrols. The first block of their escape route took them through a residential area where families had barricaded themselves inside their homes when the fighting began. Elena moved confidently through the winding streets, never hesitating at intersections or uncertain about which direction to take, demonstrating that she had thoroughly studied every possible route through the village. Chin reported over the radio that he could hear the approaching vehicles more clearly now, and their sound suggested they were moving fast and would arrive sooner than the initial estimate. "Maybe 10 minutes, he corrected his earlier assessment. "They're pushing hard to get here." Elena led them through a narrow passage between 2 buildings that opened into the village marketplace. The area was deserted, with vendor stalls abandoned and goods scattered where people had dropped them when the shooting started. The marketplace provided good concealment, but required careful movement to avoid making noise that might attract attention. Bennett noticed that Elena moved through the marketplace with the same confident familiarity she had shown in the clinic and on the rooftops. "How long have you been in this village?" she asked quietly as they navigated between the abandoned stalls. "Long enough to know every building, every street, every hiding place," Elena replied without elaborating further. Williams stumbled slightly as they moved through the marketplace, his injuries from the RPG blast affecting his balance and coordination. Elena immediately moved to assist him, demonstrating the same medical expertise she had shown earlier while maintaining her tactical awareness of their surroundings. The sound of gunfire from the direction of the clinic indicated that the insurgents were still maintaining their positions, probably shooting at shadows and movements that might indicate the SEAL team was still inside the building. Their escape had not yet been detected, giving them a crucial advantage in reaching the extraction point. Davis continued monitoring enemy radio communications and reported that the reinforcements were asking for status updates from the original assault force. "They're not getting clear answers," he said. "The guys at the clinic don't want to admit they lost control of the situation." Elena led them out of the marketplace and onto a street that began climbing toward the ridge line where helicopter extraction would be possible. The route was more exposed than the narrow alleys they had been using, but Elena moved with the confidence of someone who knew the risk was acceptable given the current enemy positions. "The reinforcements will assume their advance force has been eliminated," Elena explained as they climbed toward higher ground. "They will approach the clinic more cautiously, giving us additional time to reach the extraction point before they discover we're no longer in the building." Morrison checked his watch and calculated their progress against the timeline for enemy reinforcements. They were moving faster than he had expected, primarily due to Elena's efficient route selection and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Her preparation and planning were proving invaluable in ensuring their successful escape. Rodriguez reported that he could see the village behind them and that there was still no movement indicating pursuit. They're still focused on the clinic, he said. No sign they know we've left the building. Elena's assessment of insurgent behavior was proving accurate as the enemy maintained their siege of an empty building. The team reached a point where the street turned sharply upward as it approached the ridge line that overlooked the village. Elena paused to check their route ahead and ensure that the final approach to the extraction point would not expose them to observation from the village below. From here, we are safe from small arms fire, but visible to anyone with binoculars or scopes, Elena warned. We need to move quickly across this section. She led them up the steep slope at a pace that pushed their endurance, but minimized their exposure time. Thompson's radio crackled with a transmission from their command base announcing that weather conditions had improved sufficiently to launch a rescue helicopter. Extraction bird is airborne, he reported. Estimated time to arrival is 25 minutes. Elena smiled at the news, the first time Morrison had seen her express any emotion beyond professional focus. Perfect timing, she said. The helicopter will arrive before the insurgent reinforcements realize they are besieging an empty building. Her tactical planning had coordinated their escape with the extraction timeline, despite the complications of the unexpected battle. The team reached the ridge line and found the designated extraction point, a flat area that provided adequate space for helicopter landing while offering commanding views of the approaches from the village. Elena immediately began establishing defensive positions that would allow them to hold the area against pursuit if their escape was discovered. Chun reported that he could see the insurgent reinforcements arriving at the village and moving toward the clinic to join the siege. 3 trucks, probably 20 fighters, he announced. They're setting up for a major assault on the building. Elena's prediction that the enemy would commit additional resources to attacking the clinic rather than searching for escaped prisoners was proving accurate. Morrison found himself reflecting on the remarkable turn of events that had transformed their desperate situation into a successful mission. Elena's unexpected assistance had not only saved his team from almost certain death, but had turned a tactical disaster into a textbook example of how superior training and preparation could overcome numerical disadvantage. Why did you really help us? Morrison asked Elena as they waited for their extraction helicopter. She was cleaning her rifle with the methodical care of a professional, but she looked up to meet his eyes before answering. Because, she said simply, good soldiers recognize good soldiers, regardless of what flag they serve under. And because the people who attacked this village yesterday were not soldiers at all, but murderers who killed innocent medical workers. The sound of approaching helicopters could be heard in the distance, and Thompson began preparing to guide the extraction aircraft to their location. Elena secured her equipment and prepared to say goodbye to the team she had saved, knowing that their unlikely alliance was about to end as political realities reasserted themselves. Will we see you again? Bennett asked, having developed a professional respect for Elena's skills and character during their brief but intense cooperation. Elena smiled and shouldered her pack, transforming back into the quiet doctor who had first entered the clinic that morning. Perhaps, she said as the helicopter approached. After all, this is a small war, and we are all fighting the same enemies. The extraction helicopter descended toward their position with the distinctive sound of rotor blades cutting through mountain air, but Morrison found himself faced with an unexpected dilemma. Elena had saved his team and successfully completed their mission, but she was technically a foreign intelligence operative whose presence would create complex political problems if she returned with them to their base. Elena seemed to understand his situation without explanation. I will not be joining you on your helicopter, she said calmly as she shouldered her medical bag and rifle case. My presence would create difficulties for you that you do not need. Her understanding of the political complications demonstrated the same professional awareness she had shown throughout their engagement. Bennett felt a strange reluctance to leave Elena behind, knowing that the woman had risked her life to save strangers and would now return to a dangerous situation without backup or support. Are you sure you'll be safe? She asked, genuinely concerned for someone who had become an unlikely ally in the space of a few hours. "This is my territory," Elena replied with confidence. "I know every building, every hiding place, every route through these mountains. The insurgents will search for hours before they realize you escaped, and by then, I'll be far away." Her calm assessment of her own situation was as professional as everything else she had done. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, its crew chief immediately beginning the process of loading wounded personnel for medical evacuation. Williams and Thompson both needed hospital treatment for their injuries, but both men insisted on personally thanking Elena for her medical care and tactical assistance before boarding the aircraft. Morrison approached Elena for a final conversation before departure, knowing that he would need to brief his superiors about her assistance, but wanted to understand more about the woman who had single-handedly changed the outcome of their mission. "This will not be the last time our paths cross," he predicted. "Perhaps not," Elena agreed. "These mountains are full of people who kill doctors and nurses, bomb schools and hospitals, and target anyone who tries to help civilians. Such people are enemies of all civilized nations, regardless of politics." Her perspective on the larger conflict was pragmatic and focused on shared humanitarian concerns. Davis completed the final steps of securing the intelligence they had collected during their mission, ensuring that the computer files and documents they had retrieved would provide valuable information for future operations against the insurgent network. The successful completion of their primary objective, despite the ambush, was largely due to Elena's intervention. Chin reported that insurgent forces were still concentrated around the clinic building and had not yet discovered that their targets had escaped. Elena's tactical assessment had been accurate throughout their engagement, and her route selection had successfully avoided enemy detection during their withdrawal to the extraction point. Rodriguez shook Elena's hand before boarding the helicopter, expressing gratitude that was shared by every member of Morrison's team. "If you ever need anything," he said, "any assistance or support, you have allies in the American military." Elena smiled at the offer, understanding that such promises were sincere but limited by political realities. The helicopter crew chief indicated that they needed to depart immediately to avoid potential ground fire, as enemy forces realized that their siege of the clinic had been targeting an empty building. Elena stepped back from the aircraft as its engines increased power for takeoff, her medical bag in one hand and rifle case in the other. Morrison watched through the helicopter window as Elena became a small figure disappearing into the rocky terrain of the mountain ridge. She moved with the confident efficiency that had characterized all her actions, selecting a route that would keep her concealed from observation while providing multiple escape options if pursuit developed. The flight back to base gave Morrison time to consider the implications of what had happened and how he would report the involvement of a Russian Special Forces operative in their mission. Elena's assistance had been crucial to their survival and mission success, but her presence raised questions that would need to be addressed by intelligence analysts and senior commanders. Bennett found herself thinking about Elena's motivation for helping them, knowing that the woman's decision to intervene had been based on personal rather than political considerations. The murder of her medical staff had transformed a humanitarian aid worker back into a special forces operator seeking justice for fallen colleagues. Thompson's shoulder wound required surgery, but military doctors confirmed that Elena's field treatment had been expertly performed and had probably prevented more serious complications from blood loss and infection. Her medical skills had been as professional as her combat abilities, demonstrating the comprehensive training that elite Special Forces operators received. Williams suffered from burns and concussion from the RPG blast, but his injuries were not life-threatening, and doctors expected a full recovery within several weeks. Elena's immediate medical intervention had stabilized his condition and prevented more serious complications from developing during their escape and extraction. The intelligence files that Davis had successfully copied from the clinic computers provided extensive information about insurgent operations throughout the region, including detailed plans for attacks against coalition forces and information about weapon supply networks that have been previously unknown to military intelligence analysts. Morrison's after-action report required careful consideration of how to describe Elena's involvement without creating diplomatic problems between American and Russian military commands. He decided to focus on the tactical aspects of the engagement while noting that assistance had been provided by a local medical professional with military training. Chen's analysis of insurgent radio communications during the engagement revealed that Elena's elimination of their leadership had caused complete breakdown in command and control, transforming an organized assault force into a confused collection of individual fighters who were unable to coordinate effective tactics against the SEAL team. Rodriguez's assessment of enemy casualties confirmed that Elena's sniper fire had eliminated at least 12 insurgent fighters, including all apparent leaders and most of the experienced combatants in the assault force. Her precision shooting had been the decisive factor in shifting the tactical balance from overwhelming enemy advantage to manageable opposition. Davis reported that insurgent communications intercepted after their escape indicated that enemy forces had continued their siege of the empty clinic building for over an hour before finally realizing that their targets had escaped. Elena's route selection and tactical deception had been completely successful in avoiding pursuit during their withdrawal. The broader implications of their mission extended beyond the immediate tactical success to questions about cooperation between American and Russian special forces in areas where both nations had shared interests in combating international terrorism. Elena's assistance demonstrated that professional military personnel could work together effectively despite political tensions between their governments. Bennett's recommendation that Elena be considered for recognition or award was complicated by the woman's status as a foreign national and active intelligence operative, but Morrison included the suggestion in his report to ensure that her contribution to their mission success would be officially acknowledged by military leadership. Thompson's recovery provided an opportunity for him to reflect on Elena's medical treatment and professional demeanor under extreme stress. His assessment was that she had demonstrated the highest levels of medical expertise combined with combat skills that exceeded those of many American Special Forces operators he had worked with during his career. The insurgent network that had been targeted by their mission suffered significant disruption as a result of the intelligence they had gathered and Elena's elimination of key personnel during the engagement. Follow-up operations based on their collected intelligence led to the capture or elimination of dozens of terrorist operatives throughout the region. Elena's clinic was destroyed by insurgent forces several days after the engagement, but intelligence sources confirmed that she had successfully evacuated to a secure location before the attack. Her continued operations in the region remained classified, but occasional reports suggested that her humanitarian work was ongoing despite the increased security risks. Morrison received commendation for his team's successful completion of their mission under extremely difficult circumstances, but he privately credited Elena's intervention as the crucial factor in their survival and success. Her tactical expertise and precise shooting had transformed certain defeat into remarkable victory against overwhelming odds. 6 months later, intelligence reports indicated that the insurgent network responsible for attacking Elena's medical staff had been completely eliminated through a series of precisely targeted operations that demonstrated intimate knowledge of their personnel and locations. The reports did not identify who had provided the intelligence for these successful missions. Bennett requested assignment to operations in the same region, hoping to encounter Elena again and continue their unlikely professional relationship, but her requests were denied due to the classified nature of Elena's activities and the diplomatic sensitivities involved in any official contact between American and Russian Special Forces personnel. The village where their mission had taken place was eventually secured by coalition forces, and a new medical clinic was established to provide healthcare services to the civilian population. A plaque at the clinic entrance honored the memory of Dr. Ahmed and Nurse Fatima, the medical workers who had been killed by insurgent forces. Elena's rifle case and medical bag became legendary among Russian Special Forces units as symbols of the dual nature of modern special operations, where humanitarian assistance and precision combat capabilities were both essential skills for operators working in complex international environments where the distinction between friend and enemy was not always clear. Morrison's final assessment of the mission emphasized that success in modern special operations required not only superior training and equipment, but also the flexibility to recognize and work with unexpected allies whose motivations aligned with mission objectives, regardless of their nationality or official status in larger political conflicts. The story of the nurse who lifted the rifle and reversed the battle became part of the informal history shared among Special Forces operators from multiple nations, a reminder that in the mountains and villages where they conducted their missions, courage and professional skill were more important than the flags on uniformed shoulders. Years later, when Bennett had advanced to command her own special operations team, she would tell new operators about the day she learned that the most dangerous warriors sometimes come disguised as medical professionals, and that the outcome of desperate battles can change in an instant when the right person decides to pick up a weapon and fight for justice.